Let me read to you a passage from the second chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 23 to chapter 3, verse 6. It's the Gospel for the 9th Sunday of Ordinary Time. Year B. St. Mark writes, One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the cornfields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some ears of corn. The Pharisees said to him, Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? He answered, Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Another time he went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, Stand up in front of everyone. Then Jesus asked them, Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they remained silent. He looked round at them in anger, and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, Stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. That's from Mark chapter 2, verse 23 to chapter 3, verse 6. We're led to thoughts on sin. What do I mean? You know, the Pharisees were a party and a school of thought in Judea that arose especially during the Hasmonean dynasty from 140 to 37 BC. In the wake of the Maccabean revolt. Their heyday may have been during the time of Jesus Christ. In effect, only Christianity and Phariseeism survived the destruction of the temple in AD 70. The Pharisees may be regarded as the spiritual fathers of modern Judaism, for Pharisaic beliefs became the liturgical and ritualistic basis for rabbinic Judaism. The Pharisees have become well known because of references in the Gospels to conflicts between themselves and John the Baptist, and especially with Jesus Christ. What were the Pharisees especially concerned for? It seems that it was especially the law of God in its meticulous detail. I have read that no single tract of the key rabbinic texts, the Mishnah and the Talmud, is devoted mainly to theological issues. These texts, representing the Pharisaic insistence not only on the written Torah, but also on an oral law or tradition, are concerned primarily with interpretations of Jewish law and anecdotes about the sages and their values. It is clear that the Pharisees were successful guardians of Jewish religious practice, especially in relation to the pivotal observance of the Sabbath. They stressed the meticulous observance of small religious duties as well as large ones, with the implicit suggestion that all laws were of equal importance in pleasing God. Josephus, a Pharisee, emphasize laws rather than beliefs when describing the characteristics of an apostate and the requirements of conversion. It seems too that the rabbis were not especially concerned with the Messiah, although he was expected, the Messiah was expected, as the one who would herald an era of world peace. They may then have had insufficient focus on revealed dogma. That is, they may not have contemplated God and his nature sufficiently, which is to say his being and his revealed character. Just as the foundation of a life of mercy in the Christian life is the contemplation of the divine mercy, so the foundation of a life of obedience to the law of God is the contemplation of God. If God is not really known, then his true will, as enshrined in his law, will be but poorly known. A focus on the law of God and its minute observance may, in some instances, betray a lack of focus on God and who he really is. We must not imagine that our Lord condemned all the Pharisees and their class. The Gospels give at least one specific case, and perhaps a second, of a Pharisee who loved and followed him, even if secretly. Nicodemus the Pharisee came to him by night to be instructed by him. He defended Christ in a fashion within the Sanhedrin, as we read in John chapter 7 verse 50, and he assisted at his burial. Then there was Joseph of Arimathea, possibly a Pharisee and certainly a member of the Sanhedrin, who boldly went to Pilate for the body of Jesus. The opinion among the Pharisees was obviously divided. John tells us that many even of the authorities believed in him, but for fear of the Pharisees they did not confess it, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. John chapter 12 verse 42. So the position was fluid, perhaps there being dominant Pharisees who were especially associated with the temple aristocracy. Even among our Lord's opponents, I cannot see why there may not have been some who were hostile more because of a profound misapprehension than a ruling self-interest. For instance, Saul of Tarsus may have been a young Pharisee in Jerusalem at the time, being mentored by the elders. He launched a fierce attack on the infant church after Pentecost, but he dramatically changed at his encounter with the risen Jesus. This immediate conversion suggests a sincere following of his conscience, which, though he recognized, had been utterly mistaken. The implacable core of opposition to our Lord emanated from the chief priests and the temple aristocracy, which included Sadducees, and who, as Pilate saw, were filled with envy. Their hatred was occasioned by our Lord's holy authority, his unconcern for the good opinion of the high and mighty, and his effortless command of the religious sentiment of the common people. He did not hesitate to clean up the temple itself. The point here is that the opposition of many Pharisees, instanced in our gospel passage that I read earlier, illustrates how the supreme dimension of life, that is religion, may be perverted and become sordid. In the case of many of the Pharisees, it was God's law, made up of prescriptions varying in importance and buttressed by traditional procedures, which was turned to account for self-aggrandizement. God and love for him was lost sight of. In our gospel scene that I read earlier, from Mark chapter 2 verse 23 to chapter 3 verse 6, we see the proportions of this hardening of heart in the face of the holy and merciful action of the incarnate Son of God. We read, Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill? But they remained silent. He looked round at them in anger, and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." They were so culpably blind and stubborn as to evoke the anger of Jesus Christ. And then, having seen the spectacular divine action that followed, they withdrew to plan how to do away with him. Sin is a terrible thing, and the most terrible thing about it is that it sets a person in the direction of wanting to do away with God.